The burden of proof. What is it? It's exactly what it sounds like. It's when an individual has a burden of proving themselves after something has occurred. It's as if there is a weight on someone's back and they feel its pressure and have a need to eliminate it. The concept of the burden of proof originated in the Enlightenment period between 1650 and 1800, a time when traditional thought was being challenged and individualism and reason was emphasized by certain intellectuals. One intellect who theorized on the burden of proof was Bishop Richard Whately, author of The Elements of Rhetoric Concerning an Analysis of the Law of Moral Evidence and of Persuasion. He believed the burden of proof was also a burden of persuasion, meaning by eliminating your burden, you are usually intending to sway another party away from their prior beliefs about the relevant situation. Why does it matter? The burden of proof does have some societal significance and can be recognized in everyday life, in something as simple as a debacle over a missing piece of clothing, or in something more serious, such as a criminal defending themselves in court. Wherever it may be, and whomever may have the burden, recognizing it is necessary for understanding the meaning and motives of people's actions. It can also be utilized to restore justice and morality to a situation, essentially to keep the status quo and make things right again. The burden of proof plays a significant role in politics. It is safe to say that throughout U.S. history, many political figures have felt the burden of proof, or need to defend and explain themselves after their involvement in questionable and concerning situations. They eliminate the burden by addressing the public, and they do it to alleviate controversy, resolve distaste among public opinion, and improve their compromised reputation. Politicians are always in the public eye, being critiqued, criticized, and monitored, so it makes sense that most of their actions are followed by a formal explanation in order to eliminate any confusion or negative viewpoints. Nixon and the Watergate scandal, George W. Bush's decision to go to war in the Middle East, and Bill Clinton's affair with Monica Lewinsky are some examples of situations when politics have felt the need to speak up to persuade the public away from disapproval. Bill Clinton's affair with Monica Lewinsky was perhaps one of the most frowned upon events to occur during a U.S. presidency. The political sex scandal emerged in 1998 from a relationship between President Bill Clinton and 22-year-old White House intern Monica Lewinsky. This extramarital affair led to an investigation and ultimately the impeachment of the nation's president. On January 17, 1998, the scandal finally went public on the Drudge Report, which reported that Newsweek editors had been waiting on a story by investigative reporter Michael Isikoff. The affair was officially exposed. The story went mainstream press a few days later in the Washington Post and continued to circulate the media rapidly. With the exposure of Clinton's scandal, the White House, along with most U.S. citizens, immediately demanded answers from the president. The nonstop questions and allegations from Clinton's audiences served as a catalyst for his burden of proof. He felt the weight of the accusations, and he knew he needed to react and decide what message he wanted to portray to the country regarding this pressing issue. Clinton's method of relieving his burden of proof was essentially denial. On January 26, he spoke at the White House press conference and addressed the people with one of the best-known statements in U.S. political history. He said, "Now, I have to go back to work on my State of the Union speech, and I worked on it until pretty late last night. But I want to say one thing to the American people. I want you to listen to me. I'm going to say this again. I did not have sexual relations with that woman, Miss Lewinsky. I never told anybody to lie, not a single time, never. These allegations are false, and I need to go back to work for the American people. Thank you." By simply denying the claims and offering up no argument or explanation, I'm assuming Clinton's goal was to appear matter-of-fact and truthful in order to make it hard for audiences to doubt him. Participating in any deliberation might have made him seem like he was struggling with the issue, which would suggest an attempt at covering up his despicable actions. Many wondered whether he would confront the issue in his State of the Union speech. He eliminated this burden by completely ignoring the conflict, not discussing it at all, as he again addressed the White House and the American public. His methods of denial and self-induced ignorance seemed to be working effectively for him, as he was able to turn the other cheek and focus on more important things like running the country. Clinton was eventually impeached and faced with a lawsuit. On December 1998, the House of Representatives voted to issue articles of impeachment against him, which was followed by a 21-day trial in the Senate. At the end of the trial, he was acquitted of all charges and remained in office. Did President Clinton succeed in eliminating his burden of proof? Considering that President Clinton was able to remain in office after being acquitted of all charges when put on trial, I would argue that his methods proved to be effective. At the release of the scandal, he eliminated his burden of addressing the issue by taking a direct approach and informing his audiences that the allegations were false. He then was able to move on from the obstacle for the time being and focus on running the country. When the scandal continued to circulate, Clinton's new challenge was to explain the findings in a way that still supported his original claim of not having sexual relations with Ms. Lewinsky. Additionally, he had another burden of keeping his job at a time when it was being threatened. He needed to act wisely if he wanted to have any shot at remaining in office. His responses to judiciary officials stayed consistent with his original claims, which made it difficult for these officials to prove him wrong. Even though he was impeached, he was not proven guilty, and the threat of losing his position in office, the ultimate burden, was eliminated. Bill Clinton's burden of proof brought about by his sexual affair with Monica Lewinsky is just one example of how this rhetorical scenario can play out in politics. Despite its evident existence in politics and law, the burden also exists in something as simple as a petty argument between two friends or an accusation of a student cheating on an exam. It is a good indicator of individual motives, who feels at fault, who needs to be persuaded, and who needs to act in relations between two given parties.